Hey, Chris in Dover has just emailed. Thank you, Chris. He asked this question. He said, if an e-scooter needs insurance, tax, licence, helmet, etc. to be road legal, then surely would the same apply to an e-bike? We've been discussing the differences this morning. I wonder what you think. A lot of people have said, well, you're very differently positioned on an e-scooter. You're a little bit more precarious, but, maybe in your eyes they are the same. Let's discuss this now with Nick Freeman, motoring lawyer, who's launched a petition to get better regulation around e-scooters and bicycles, incidentally. Nick, thank you for being with us this morning. So why did you launch this petition? What were your particular concerns?
Good morning, Anna. Well, my primary concern is, if we're going to just deal with e-scooters for a moment,
Sure.
that there is law in place. It's exactly the same law. There's no specific law, so it's the same law because they're regarded as motor vehicles. So you've got speed limits, drink drive limits, etc., etc. But that law is redundant because we have no idea who at any one time is driving an e-scooter. So I started the petition really to try and, I want the whole matter properly regulated, but the starting point is identification, whether it be a number plate or a registered tabard, that the driver, and indeed for me cyclists, and I know we're not going to talk about cyclists, so at any one time, as we're sharing road space, we need to share the law, and it's imperative that we know at any one time who's going through the red light, who's driving dangerously, driving properly, driving whilst over the limit through drink or drugs. At the moment, all you could, when a car drives improperly, and they do regularly, you get a video and it's often downloaded to the police, and that person's prosecuted because there's a system in place to locate the driver. There is no system in place at the moment to locate the e-scooter rider. So, in essence, they use their vehicle with impunity. And of course, if people know they're going to be anonymous, they tend to ride in a different way. You imagine taking the registration plate off cars. You imagine the mayhem that will be unleashed because people, being human beings, will say, well, I'm not going to get caught, so I know there's law, but it's not going to work. There are no police on the road, so I can do what I like. And regrettably, that's where we are with e-scooters. I mean, e-scooters are complicated because they are, in fact, illegal, apart from the rental ones.
Yes.
So there are so many issues. Look, there are environmentally huge benefits from CO2, but then, of course, the public aren't hearing. You've just alluded to the fact that the manufacture of these and the disposal, and you've not mentioned that,
No.
means that you've got to use them. For a car, for example, that starts to become more environmentally friendly when that vehicle, the electric vehicle, has done 148,000 miles. We don't hear about that because there, of course, are the production costs, the process of production and the process of disposal. And those all create a carbon footprint with the brakes and with the tyres. But no one's talking about that because the government are very anxious to move us in a particular direction, rather like they did with diesel fuel. So there are so many issues here.
Yeah, I was about to say that, indeed. Yes, so many issues. And I'm glad you picked up on that point because it's been raised this morning by Lisa saying, yeah, we need to know who's riding them. We need, when a vendor is selling one, for it all to go through. Now, do you think that we're playing catch up here? So e-scooters, relatively new. We didn't maybe realise, when we first started, how different they would be to your ordinary sort of non-electric scooter. And we can play catch up and we can change the law here.
Well, we need specific law, but we need a specific place, don't we? For a start, they are inherently dangerous to design. Your previous contributor has alluded to that the wheels are too small. And that there's a balance problem,
yes.
And you're so vulnerable. So, in my view, yes, there's a fantastic place for them. They should be encouraged, although one problem, of course, is they're used largely for short distances, and what we really want are people to walk, because if people are using e-scooters rather than walking, there's a statistic that says that some huge proportion of journey time is under a mile. We really want people to walk that, don't go on an e-scooter. So we're going to burden the national health. But yes, there is a place for them, but we need an infrastructure. And you may have heard today that London is the most congested city in the world because of cycle lanes. So we've got this constant juxtaposition of what are we going to do. In my view, what we need to do is we need a proper infrastructure, which is going to be expensive, and we need to reclaim not the roads, but part of the pavements, because we don't need a huge area. They need to be segregated so that they are safe, and we need to take part of the pavement and maybe a very small fraction of the road so that cars can continue on their journeys, bearing in mind lots of cars are now going to be electric in the future. So they are going to need passage, they're going to need to move, and we need them in a safe, segregated area. So at least that will help people not come into contact with other vehicles, because when people fall, if you fall under a car, a bus or a lorry, the consequences are horrendous.
Yes.
But without that infrastructure, then it's going to be mayhem on the road, whatever legislation you introduce. But at current time, as you know, it's certainly in London, the maximum speed is 12.5 miles an hour of rental ones. But the private ones that are used everywhere can go up to sort of 68 miles an hour. And they're never held to account.
Yes,
So
there should be. Yeah.
it's an area that we need to get hold of very quickly. In answer to your question, yes, we are playing catch up. They are eventually going to become law, I think, very, very soon, because it's an easy thing to do. But typically the law is not in place. The infrastructure is not in place. And, if the government deal with this in a knee-jerk way, it's going to cost the taxpayer a lot more money financially, and the people who use them are going to be involved in very serious accidents, which can be avoided if we have proper rules in place, proper means of identification, and a safe place with high curbs, like they do across Europe, where they're safe, where vehicles are not allowed to go. Other vehicles are not allowed to go. So if they do fall, they're just falling off and hurting themselves. And at the moment, you don't need to wear a helmet. It's recommended you wear a helmet. It's recommended you wear a high-vis jacket. Most of these, it needs to be law. You hit your head, you need protection. In a car, it's not recommended you wear a seatbelt. You have to wear a seatbelt. So why should it be different when you're driving an e-scooter and you're so vulnerable and they are so precarious? We need the government to get hold of this and get the right advice and move forward in a sensible way. And my great fear is that they're going to involve a knee-jerk reaction, and they're going to just be they're not going to think of this. They're going to be reactive. And what they need to do is be proactive and design a plan that's carefully thought out, that's going to work for the country. And that at the moment doesn't appear to be happening.
No, indeed. And back to your petition. So you didn't get the numbers to have it debated in Parliament, but you did get 10,000, as I understand it, which means you at least have to have a response, don't you, from the government?
Yeah, we have a response, which is a realistic hurdle. And we'll see how the government responds. This is something that's not going to go away. And in my view, at some time in the very near future, there will have to be a debate in Parliament, because you cannot have, certainly as far as e-scooters are concerned, you cannot have the system that currently prevails, even when they're introduced, that they go around with road traffic laws such as drink drive limits, etc., penalty points, disqualification, prison, death by dangerous driving. All that is in place, but you can't really enforce it because you don't know at any one time who is doing anything. So you see these videos on YouTube of the most horrendous accidents, and then people get off their e-scooter, they punch someone in the face, and off they go. They're never brought to account, and we don't know who they are. And I do appreciate that often, criminal gangs are going to probably have false means of identification, as car drivers do. But at least it's a step forward, and we need to do that. We need to have identification as a starting point to make people be responsible and accountable. And then we move forward from there. And there are always going to be people who break the law, but we can only try and do the best. At the moment, we're not trying to do the best. We're closing our eyes to it.
And final point, Nick, but you mentioned, there will be a place for them. Some people have suggested, well, does there need to be? If we've got cycles and we've got cycle hire schemes, and of course they're not without their problems too, but surely we could just revert to that, where it's, maybe the distance is too long to walk.
They're already here, aren't they?
Genie's out of the bottle or whatever you say.
It's gone. It's not the stable zone. It's not going back. So, there's a huge market for them. People love them. They're not too expensive. So that we're not going to go back. They're illegal at the moment, and they're already everywhere.
True.
And so they're definitely here to stay.
On that point, Nick, brilliant to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. And you're right, there will be further debate going forward, at which point we will invite you back onto the show. That's Nick Freeman, then motoring lawyer, who, as you've heard, launched a petition to get better regulation around e-scooters, identification, which, of course, interestingly, is something that a lot of you have been calling for throughout the course of the show today.